ready for it. Get ready for it. Yeah, this is it. Go! 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 Yeah, this is it. Go! Go! Let's go! Yeah, this is it. Yeah, it's about to break. Got what it's gonna take. Go ahead and don't hesitate. Let's go. When you're made for this, yeah, it's obvious. Top another list. Let's go. Get ready for it. Get ready for it. Get ready for it. Yeah, this is it. Go! Go! Yeah, this is it. Go! Let's go! This is it. It's now or it's now. No plan with forever. It's now or it's now. It's down to the wire. Who gonna take the entire? It's down to the wire. This is it.
For drivers in GT World Challenge America, fast racetracks are nothing new. In the U.S., it's places like Road America, Watkins Glen, and VIR that bring GT3 cars up to terminal velocity. But even these half-century-old American classics are shiny and new compared to some of Europe's fastest venues. We've already visited Spa-Francorchamps with its sweeping corners and elevation changes, but we haven't yet visited the Italian superspeedway known as Autodromo Nazionale Monza. That changes today for round 3 of the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. Constructed in 1922, it's on the older end of international racetracks, and its history is packed full of stories, wins, losses, and now, all this history is accessible for drivers on Assetto Corsa Competizione. To drive under the old oval, to hear the echoes of one of the greatest circuits in the world, Monza is an experience like no other. Welcome to GT World. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined by Ryan Marine for the 3rd chapter of the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. 60 minutes of multi-class GT3 and GT4 racing today, Ryan. Our 3rd event, and this is going to be so much fun. A fast super speedway, long straights, and super hard braking zones to fire off our 3rd event.
Yeah, that's right, Kyle. Thanks so much. It is such a classic venue. Couldn't have described it any better if I were to try, so I'm not going to. History just packed into this place. So much has unfolded since 1922 when this circuit was unveiled, and it's proven to be a great host to motorsport. Open wheel, of course, but GT racing as well, and I can't wait to see what our sim racers and pro racers racing here at ACC have in store for us today.
So we've got qualifying underway right now for the GT4 category, and we're going to show you that here in just a minute. We've got about 50 drivers set up to go racing today. There's Simon Fisher in the number 595. Of course, this GT World Challenge America Esports Championship is brought to you by all the partners involved with this event. Of course, just to list a few: FCP Euro, Liquimali, Corteco, Asus Republic of Gamers and Tough Gaming, Fanatec, AWS, CrowdStrike, Pirelli, Rebellion, and Total. All those partners coming together to bring us a spectacular racing event here in the virtual world in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Qualifying underway now here, Ryan, and we're going to start with our GT4 drivers as they take to Monza.
That's right, the GT4 field, as it has been all season long. This is available to sim racers that took the opportunity to attempt to qualify for this race, and they have made the field. Interesting to note that a double race winner already, Honor Cavillon, our points leader in GT4 coming into this event, already out on track, and unsurprisingly, already with the fastest lap time of the GT4 runners to this point. Simon Fisher, who we're watching right here, certainly expect to be a factor towards the front. Lavender currently up in the 3rd spot, another one that has had a great start to this season. I think this track, by the way, really does suit the multi-class racing quite well. We talked a lot at Bathurst a couple of weeks ago for the 2nd round of the championship about the challenges of multi-class racing at a track like that. Here, I do think the ability for the GT3 cars to stretch their legs a little bit on the long straightaway should give them ample opportunity to make passes around the GT4 class cars, but even still, it will be a challenge, especially into some of the tight portions like the one we're looking at right here.
So a couple weeks ago, we took on Mount Panorama at Bathurst, and that race was a chaotic mess to start. We actually had to restart the race to get something green flag racing, and we finally did. But the GT4 category started at the back and kind of had to drive through all that. I'd like to take a look at the points, Ryan, as we head into our third event of the season. Have a look at this. Caleb John Lavender trails Anor Cavillon by 15 points as we enter our third round. It's still pretty tight. In GT3, the standings are tied, but I think a hierarchy is clearly starting to align itself in our third round.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anor Cavillon has been excellent. It's been 2 dominant performances. Showed really well in our non-championship endurance race at Spa, it's worth pointing out. Caleb John Lavender and Simon Fisher, though, have consistently been right there, nipping at our heels, and should have an opportunity, if they can qualify well, to give a run at that class win for GT4 here at Monza. I think it's going to be interesting, too, to see which car does best at a track like this. We talk a lot about the balance of performance, but there still is that horses for courses nature of GT racing. Some cars, maybe those that are a little bit slipperier through the air, they might have an advantage on a course like Monza. There's some thought as well to those that make their speed more through the grunt power in a straight line versus carrying speed through long, fast corners. They might be benefited here as well. So far, though, pretty impressive stuff from Cavillon, over a second clear of second place.
Yeah, 1.2 up the road, then 1.2 back to Cameron Cinsano in the number 9. Takis Weeks in the 626 in the BMW is running in 4th. And this is the car that I would expect to be pretty fast here, pretty torquey, has a lot of top-end speed, a bit of a off-course moment there for one of the drivers in one of the M4s. So car differences are going to be a pretty big deal here this week, Ryan, because of this racetrack. We'll go over a track map a little bit later in the broadcast before the green flag to show everybody, but this place is so much straightaway and really tight point-and-shoot corners. So it's really all about managing the slipstream, going defensive if you need to, and just wringing out every little bit of horsepower you can out of these sports cars.
That's right. It is pretty much the polar opposite of what we saw at Bathurst in the last round. And yes, there are some high-speed sections. Certainly the Conrad Straight down into the Chase comes to mind, but you have all that twisty section with the tight walls on either side. This is a much different setting here this week, and as a consequence, we might see some different drivers or different cars come to the fore. But at the end of the day, because of BOP, talented drivers will be able to bring whatever car it is that they're driving up towards the front of the field, and I think we've seen that so far with Cavillon now up by about 9/10 of a second. A great lap there from Sansano to jump up into second just a moment ago in the Mercedes AMG.
Love this car, love how it sounds as it dives into turn number 1. Really tight chicanes. You see those bright orange sausage curbs there on the apexes. In the GT3 cars, you probably want to stay off those. In the GT4s, they have a little bit more ground clearance. You might be able to use those just to help the car rotate through some of the slower corners here, Ryan. But in the faster sections, you're going to want to stay off those. Any tires that are in the air are not tires that are turning, braking, or accelerating.
That's a great point, and I think also the difference between the GT4 cars and GT3 cars and how much curbing they can use is going to be something worth keeping an eye on, because I think even though the cars look pretty similar to the naked eye, they are very different between GT3 and GT4, and I think that kind of gets confusing from time to time, especially when you have cars that look so similar, like the GT3 Mercedes versus this GT4 Mercedes. But the GT4 cars are very, very closely related to their road-going counterparts. Yes, they've been stripped out. Yes, they have some special purpose-built racing components, but they are way, way, way less dependent on aerodynamics compared to the GT3 cars. The sophistication just isn't there with the traction control and ABS and things of that nature. In the case of the Maserati, you don't have any of the driver aids that are there, certainly for the GT3 cars and most of the GT4 field. So there is a lot of difference between the two, and just looking at them without knowing a whole lot about that, you might not come to that conclusion, but the fact of the matter is there is a great deal of difference, and it comes down in a lot of ways to how you have to drive the car and also how forgiving they are over some of the bumps and other aspects of the racetrack. And I think the GT4 cars, to your point, should be a bit more forgiving over some of the harsh curbing.
Got an Aston Martin in the field this week, as well as Joseph Kostovich in the number 240. He's the only Aston Martin in this lineup today. A couple by that I mean 4 Porsche Cayman 718 GT4s. There is an Audi R8 GT4. That's Caleb John Lavender in second. Sansano is the only Mercedes in the field. 4 BMWs. It looks like 2 Maseratis, and then the Aston we're looking at with Kostovich in the 9x9 sim racing cars. He comes across the line 158, 197. Not going to be good enough to advance his position. But the Aston is another car I would have thought would be good here, Ryan. But I've talked to Kenton Cook, who drives this car in the real world, and he says it's not quite so much a straight line car like you'd think it would be. It's actually quite good at handling in some of the smaller and tighter racetracks. So Kostovich might be at a slight disadvantage here on the straightaways.
It is funny the way that works out, and some of the time that's because of the BOP process. A car that has great straight line speed most likely is going to have a more restrictive air restrictor to choke some of that back, and as a consequence, then the teams need to find a way to compensate, and they have to be faster through the corners, and I think the inverse has proven to be true. There certainly have been times talking to some of the Mercedes AMG runners in the GT3 field in GT World Challenge America competition over the last couple of years. They keep telling me, you know what, you guys on TV, you talk about us being a grunt power car, but fact of the matter is we're so choked back right now, we're actually stronger in the corners than we are on the straights relative to our competition. And it's all a bit in flux because of the balance of performance, but it is kind of funny how that shakes out as we get our first glance here at the GT3 cars. They had to sit and wait for the first half of the qualifying session to come to a conclusion, and now they get to go out there and join the GT4 cars, and we'll see what we have in store. The word is that this is a good track for the Mercedes. We'll see if that still holds up. That was perhaps before a recent update in Assetto Corsa, and that might have opened the door for some of the other manufacturers to come to the fore.
Looking at Nate Vincent in the number 72 FCP Euro Liqui-Moly Mercedes AMG GT3. He heads down into what's called Parabolica. Looking at it from high above here, this is a really interesting shaped corner, sort of an early apex. Then the car is going to just track out on corner exit. You're going to throttle up, and it'll just naturally swing out to the left, carry the speed, and ride the rim on the outside of that corner. Then throttle up for the straightaway, get through the gears, pull over to driver's right if you'd like to defend a position, and then just stay in the throttle for what feels like ages here, Ryan, before you stamp on that brake pedal and hope it stops, because you're doing about 175 miles an hour here.
Yeah, and then you funnel down into this tight chicane, and you might be looking at somewhere around 40 miles an hour through this part of the track, from the fastest speeds on the track to the slowest, and you have to do it in a short amount of time. It puts a premium on those that can get the braking just right, dial in that ABS just the way that you want it for that corner. A great passing opportunity, but it's full of peril as well because it is so tight, and the curbs are not super forgiving either. So if you do make that passing attempt, you really want to be beyond the driver you're attempting to overtake by the time you get into the meat of the corner itself. And it does take a little bit of cooperation between the two drivers to get it done and get it done cleanly. And that will be true, especially so, I think, when we get into some of the mixed class racing deeper into the race.
Other drivers making a return this week: Brian Heitkotter in the number 5 Chris Forsberg racing car, and Chris Forsberg in a similar looking number 64 Nissan GTR Nismo GT3. So Forsberg right now has not yet laid down a qualifying lap. No one has just yet. No times on the board. And we'll see how Forsberg and Heitkotter fare in this third round of the season. You see one of the M6 GT3s behind. That could be a number of drivers. Probably is not Ben Green, because he's entering turn number 1. But there is a handful of these kind of mint and black GT3 cars. And Ryan, we just learned about Ben Green's history. He's got quite a history in motorsport in England with BMW.
Yes, that's right. Raced in British GT going back to 2019. Actually finished 13th in the Pro-Am category. A very competitive British GT championship. Did that racing for Century Motorsport in a BMW M6 GT3. Has that tie into the BMW factory and was supported to some extent racing in the DTM Trophy Series, which was a support series to DTM last year, utilizing GT3 equipment. Again, in BMW machinery. So definitely a driver with some pedigree, has got it done racing on a lot of these same circuits. Not sure about Monza, but there's a pretty good chance he's raced there at one point or another. And with that BMW tie-in, a perfect fit for the classic BMW guys. He got hooked up with Toby Grahovic and the rest of the classic team and plugged into one of their virtual race seats and doing a nice job here, acquitting himself quite well. Hasn't set a time yet, but looking awfully smooth on what I believe to be his first flying lap.
As times start to come across the board, we've got 5 minutes left here in qualifying. For those of you that have been here the last couple rounds and participated in the giveaways that Asus, Republic of Gamers, and Fanatec are involved in, we've got some details on those PCs. But first, make sure that you visit the GT World Challenge America social media channels, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, to enter yourself in these giveaways. Asus Tough Gaming PCs on raffle here. Well, not really raffle. They're giving them away, Ryan. 3080 GPUs. Can't get those right now, but you can get them in the giveaway. And AMD CPU is going to be paired together in what I can only imagine is going to be a truly epic Asus gaming rig. Two of them being given away with Fanatec Sim Racing gear. Make sure that you check out GT World Challenge America on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to learn more on how to enter. So with times on the board now, we'll jump up to the top because Hamza Golzar is no longer in the top spot. Philippe Simard comes across the line in the Ferrari, and that is a 147.160 by a tenth of a second. He sits on top of the standings.
That's really interesting to see. Simard has been so impressive with outright pace over the course of this season. Had a great run to pole back in the opener at the Nürburgring, put the car on pole, that car that he shared with Michael Cadacciolo, who's currently in fourth, among others, for the endurance round at Spa, and also was really impressive at Bathurst a couple of weeks back. This car has factored in towards the front, and I'll tell you what, there is something fitting about seeing a red Ferrari up at the top of the running order here on home turf at Monza.
That's an interesting point that you mentioned, as there's a car off the racetrack in front. That's one of the Lamborghini Huracan GT3s, but the Italian red racehorse right now at the top of the order with a 147.160. Lucas Muller, Lucas with a K, runs in third right now, and we had to laugh a little bit. We were discussing this morning that we learned that Lucas and Lucas are not related in any way, which one of the Lucases was joking that it would be sort of silly for parents to name both their children Lucas and only change one letter. And I thought that was kind of funny because I had that assumption, and it was a wrong assumption. So not related, but they're running third and fourth in similar looking race cars as well. So it's going to be hard to tell them apart just by glancing.
Well, boxing great George Foreman takes exception to the notion that naming the children the same name is a bad idea, and I wouldn't contradict George Foreman. Even at whatever age he's gotten up to now, I suspect he could still pack a punch. So, you know, I'm not going to judge anyone for their naming habits, but it is nice to know there is no official relation. But in case you're kind of wondering what we're talking about, we do have two Lucas Mullers in the field. They're in identical-looking Mercedes. There you got the look at them right there. Fourth and fifth, separated by less than a tenth of a second. Racing for the Haupt Racing team, endurance racing outfit. And one is spelled Lucas with a C, the other Lucas with a K. They've both been very fast. Haven't had the best of luck throughout the course of the season, but there is some thought that this might be the track for the Mercedes. And look at that right there. Second through sixth, all Mercedes AMG, broken up just by that one prancing horse of Philippe Simard.
Right now, there's no one on track that is about to beat that pole time either. Philippe Simard is on a flyer right now, a tenth up, as he heads through. I believe we're in the Lesmos here. It'll be the first Lesmo for Simard in that Ferrari. While we're on this, it'd be good time to have a look at the points here. Condacciolo in the Mercedes-AMG GT3 tied with Troy Barman after our race at Bathurst a week ago, or 2 weeks ago rather, that ended in what I could only describe as chaos, with Tom O'Gorman running out of fuel and kind of the lead swapping around a few times, but Condacciolo and Barman tied with a win each heading into the third round.
Well, it started with some chaos, too, because we had to do a complete restart of the race due to an accident in Hell Corner, the first corner on the first lap, and that made us all scramble a little bit, but as it turned out, it led to a great race, a lot of drama up at the front, and we leave that race, as you noted, with a tie at the top of the points table. Lucas with a K in third, only 10 points back. And the way this has gone so far, with as unpredictable as it has been, I wouldn't write off anybody who's kind of on this screen at this point and in the mix. You see, Philippe Simard certainly is one that should be in the conversation as well. Just hasn't had a ton of luck all the time, but has shown great pace, and that goes for several on this list. I do think, though, if somebody can go on a bit of a run like we saw from Brian Heitkotter back in GT Rivals, that could change the equation and start to weed the field down just a little bit. But as it stands, it's pretty wide open, and there's a lot of good drivers, both real-world and sim racing drivers, who are very much in the mix.
Philippe Simard went quicker on that most recent lap, a 146.719. He's the only driver to crack the 147 mark, so Simard now sits atop the order by 3.5 tenths of a second. Then Kondashoglu, Muller, and Blanton, the rest of your top 5. Then the other Muller, Barman, Heitkotter, Whitmer, and McMillan round out the rest of your top 10 as the checkered flag flies for the majority of the field. And we're going to get set up for a 60-minute event, and all 60 minutes, I think, for most drivers is to come down to the first 60 seconds. How do you get through turn 1 here, that tight chicane, without having drama and incidents that could lead to the end of your day?
Start from pit lane? I don't know. It's a great question. It's a difficult corner in the best of circumstances, and when you take the full field coming from a rolling start, funneling down into that tight chicane, it almost guarantees there's going to be some fireworks. Qualifying here at this track, so crucial, maybe more so even than Bathurst from a couple of weeks ago. Simard certainly will be in the best position, but yeah, right now if you're starting in the middle of this pack, you're holding your breath because there's a lot of different ways it can all go wrong.
So in just a moment, we'll go over the post-race here, or the post-qualifying information, and get your grid set up for this event. Here's a look at it. Philippe Simard at the top of the order. Hamza Golzar 3.5 tenths back in the Mercedes-AMG GT3. And look at all the Mercedes and look at the Ferrari on top of them, Ryan. That is really interesting to me that Simard was able to beat what looks to be about 7 of those Mercedes lined up behind him. Then Heitkotter, Whitmer, and McMillan rounding out the rest of the top 10.
Well, there was a lot of talk coming in that the Mercedes-AMG GT3 would be the car to beat here. Interesting that on home turf, the Ferrari was able to answer that challenge and take a pole by a fairly comprehensive margin, over 0.3 of a second. That's big here in GT3 racing in general, but certainly here in the SRO America Esports Championship. That is a big margin from first to second. But yeah, Mercedes-AMG very well represented. Brian Heitkotter doing a lot with that Nissan Nismo GT3 that maybe doesn't have the same kind of outright pace, although this is a car that historically has done well in straight line sections of tracks. That's where it has shown its strength. Really cool to see Carl Whitmer there with a nice run in the NSX. And then the Mercedes, again, in 10th of McMillan. Last note about Whitmer in that Honda NSX, a lot of development on that car done by Jazz Motorsports, which is actually based in Italy. And so while it is a Japanese company, and a lot of the development was done in the U.S. by Honda Performance Development, there is an Italian flair to that NSX. And so this is something of a home track if you think about it from that standpoint for that vehicle.
The FCP Euro Mercedes will be starting right behind each other. Herzen and Vincent 22nd and 23rd. Chris Forsberg rolls off 25th. We'll move on now to GT4. At the top of the order there, it's Anor Cavillon in the Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sport in the number 56. Caleb John Lavender in the 999. Sansano, Litkis, and Weeks. The rest of the top 5 there, Ryan. GT4 has been a little bit more cut and dry than GT3 has been. I think those top 2 are the ones to watch. They might draft it away and try to get a gap on third place before the traffic comes rolling through.
I think you're right. That's the other caveat, though, is if they're going to give a bit of a class split between GT3 and GT4, I suspect they will. That's what they've done in the past. But if they get too close, there is a chance those front runners from GT4 could get caught up in some of the trouble at the back of the GT3 field. So that will be one thing to keep an eye on here at the start.
We're going to be back in just a moment with the green flag here for our third round of the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. 60 minutes of virtual sports car racing are about to kick off for the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. It's the third round of the season at one of the fastest tracks in Europe, Monza in Italy. Today, the high speeds and heavy braking zones characterize this place, and the harder you attack, the more you're rewarded. Welcome back to GT World. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined by Ryan Marine. Ryan, we're just about to kick things off. 60 minutes, GT3 and GT4. Got a 40-car grid about to take the green in just a moment. Your final thoughts here before we roll into a track map?
A lot of apprehension, of course, going into turn one, which you'll detail on the track map in just a moment, but so much history. Love the Monza circuit. You can't think about this place without thinking about the highs and the lows of motorsports. It's all happened here at one point or another. The third oldest purpose-built motorsports facility anywhere in the world, behind the now defunct Brooklands track in the UK and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the States. Just one of the classic venues in road racing, and really puts a strain on engines and brakes with so many high-speed sections that funnel down into tight corners.
Well, let's have a look at Autodromo Nazionale Monza for our third round of the season. And it's all going to begin with a long front straightaway past the grandstands, past the pit lane, into the first corner. It's a very tight first gear right left-hand complex that will slow you on down. You might be able to go 3 wide into the corner. You're not going to come out that way, though. Then you're going to make that left sweep through Curva Grande. That's turn number 2 into Variante della Roggia, into the second chicane. That's what we'll call it just for simplicity. The two Lesmos, Curva di Lesmo 1 and Curva di Lesmo 2, two right-handers very similar. Got a little bit of camber to help you out with the rotation. And then on the back straightaway towards Variante Ascari, that is turn number 7 on the old circuit. Then you're going to sweep left, right, left, throttle back up all the way down to Parabolica, which is the last corner on the racetrack, turn number 8 on the old circuit. Early apex, then let the car sweep on out, rim ride the edge, back onto the front straightaway. It happens in about 1 minute and 47 seconds, and let me tell you, it's going to feel like a whole lot faster than that once we get rolling up to 175 miles an hour on the front straightaway and into the first corner. So we're just about ready to get pacing here, Ryan. I'm out of breath just talking about this as we get rolling. We've got 40 drivers lined up for this one. And turn 1, we thought it was going to be chaotic at Bathurst. It was, and I have the same feelings about this one. But this is a corner that I think more people know is going to be chaos. It might have everyone back up just a little bit and maybe rethink chucking it down the inside on the opening lap.
Well, I like your optimism, and I'm going to go with you because I want to see a nice, clean start to this. In the practice session that led into qualifying, you saw a lot of the signboards posted around the track had already disintegrated into pieces of styrofoam, so it gives you an idea. Even when the cars are just going around one at a time or more spaced out, there still is quite a bit of danger in that part of the racetrack. I hope that they've got their heads on straight. I hope they've thought this through, maybe talked with the drivers who are starting around them, because you really need to have a clean start to this race in order to have a chance to win it. The guys up at the front, and the girls at the front for that matter, are so good, both in GT3 and GT4, and to pick up any kind of damage at a track like this, that also pretty much dooms your hopes. So there is a whole lot riding on the first corner. They say you can't win a race there, but you can lose it. I'm not so sure that that's true any more than here at Monza.
Troy Barman, the winner from Bathurst a few weeks ago, is in 7th for the start of this race. My mind always goes to the brakes on the opening lap. They are not warmed up. Your tires are not warmed up. You're not going to have maximum grip. The other issue with the first corner is that it's so slow, you can't really utilize downforce at all. So you're relying every little bit on those tires that you didn't get all the way warmed up. And as you stomp on those brakes, if you have your brake bias too far rear, you could spin the car out. Too far forward, you won't make the corner. So it's a delicate balance of adjusting all the driver aids to make sure that you've got braking force when you want it. I think some drivers like Brian Heitkotter, with the experience they have in the real world and the sim, I think you're going to see Heitkotter go 3 wide and try to make up spots on the inside. Some other drivers might be a bit more skittish and just move drivers left and hope that they don't get hit.
It's going to be tempting to make that lunge to the inside, that's for sure. And then the problem is you get there and you find out perhaps there's not as much room as you would hope there would be. The other challenge, speaking of the braking aspect going into that corner, you're not coming at full speed, so your brake marker is going to be a little bit different than it would be if you were carrying the same kind of speed you would on a flying lap. You got to adjust to that on the fly, or perhaps some of these drivers have practiced a race start. That would be smart, and might have a sense for where their adjusted braking point would be approaching that corner at a slower rate of speed.
double file. There's about 40 cars here. Again, about 30 of them are GT3 machines, so 15 rows of virtual GT3 race cars about to launch in Assetto Corsa Competizione for the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. Our third round of the season kicked things off about a month ago at the Nürburgring. Then it was our 6 hours of Spa, and then our second points round at Mount Panorama Bathurst a few weeks ago. We returned to one of the European classics, Autodromo Monza, here today as we sweep through the Parabolica for the last time under pacing conditions. Philippe Simard in the lone Ferrari GT3 up at the front of the field. He's got a bunch of thunderous Mercedes lined up behind him as they come out of Parabolica. It's going to be a little bit of a run down to the start-finish line here before they launch green, but getting through the gears is going to be super important. Making sure that you come out the other side of the first chicane is really the goal for the entire first lap. Side by side now lined up. Field tightening up now as they come to the start-finish line. And for the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship, we are green. Contact already behind him. Cody Blanton in the number 10. He got doored by the 44 of Lucas Muller. 3 wide already as they head down to the first corner. We're going to look 4 wide as the 22 of Whitmer looks up driver's right. Going to back out again. That's not going to be a great idea. Into the first corner on the brakes. So far, so good. Can we get it through here clean? Oh, that was really tight. We're still 3 wide. That's McMillan in the dark red Mercedes. We did that somehow, Ryan. Excellent job by everybody. There's a Lamborghini side by side in the background. They've gotten it sorted out, and we're going to continue. What a phenomenal start in GT3.
That was great stuff. Of course, we still have the GT4 field that needs to funnel through there, so we can't completely write it off as a success. I'll say this too, Simard was the big loser there at the start, just got out-dragged into that top corner. Already had lost the top spot even before the braking zone, and now has slipped back to 4th. So Simard finds himself right in the middle of that huge horde of Mercedes-AMG GT3s.
There was one Lamborghini turned around sideways. I didn't catch who that was, but GT4 has had a pretty clean start as well. So with that, we're going to head back up towards the front because Simard has lost some positions. He's now 4th place now as we sweep on through towards Ascari for the first time. Hamza Gulzar in the green Mercedes is the race leader, and the pole sitter back to 4th with Lucas behind him.
A fascinating start here. I know Simard's got a lot of speed in that car, but it did not manifest itself at the drop of the green flag. Those Mercedes got a big jump, and Simard was on the back foot, forced to be in a defensive posture, which I think compromised his line a little bit through that opening chicane, and got beat in a straight line again just a little bit later, leaving that corner, slipping all the way back here into 4th, but starting to pile some pressure onto the back of these Mercedes. Look at him in a slipstream here, coming down the front straightaway for the first time at speed.
He's got 2 teammates lined up behind him. They're going to push and shove each other. It's like Talladega here in Italy. Into the first corner again. Simard goes defensive on the 55 of Lucas Muller. In the brakes, you see the 55 gain there. Ryan Heitkotter and Barman 7th and 8th behind. And now the Mullers are side by side for a moment.
That's going to give an opportunity for the 191. That's Barman, the winner at Bathurst, to make a lunge. Able to come up alongside, but doesn't have the preferred line right here and has to fall back in line for these Mercedes. Nose to tail, making their way around the Italian classic track of Monza.
On the brakes a little earlier than teammate in front of him. In the background, you see there's Nelson Mason in the number 35 Audi R8 GT3. Carl Whitmer moves over driver's right. Nick McMillan squeezes up the inside. He wants a spot, but can't do it by the time they get to the first Lesmo.
Interesting that Heitkotter has not been able to make more progress. Looked like he was getting pretty aggressive as you predicted at the start, but has been forced to settle back in there in 8th. That's where he qualified and has lost touch with that battle up ahead. Our 2 Mullers, I think, were side by side a moment ago. Here's Heitkotter's look of it as they go under the bridge. That's the old oval that they're passing under right there. Host of the Race of 2 Worlds, famously, that pitted the IndyCar stars of the 50s and the Roadster era up against the best from Formula One.
Through Ascari, that complex is very high speed, and there's big, tall anti-cut curbs that you would like to stay off of. I think Guy and Cosmo and I labeled them bumble strips. They're sort of yellow and black painted, striped track features that will launch your car airborne. As you see, Barman going to throttle up on the right. Both Mullers run wide on the exit of Parabolica. Now Barman going to take that momentum and run with it down the front straightaway, right on that white line.
That was a great job by Barman to get up to the inside. That wider line, I think, from Moeller actually let him carry a little bit of speed, and now he's got the advantage of a slipstream with his teammate just ahead. That might be a little bit of an assist there from one of the two Moellers, but unable to be enough. Great job, Barman, who was able to pull up alongside and get that pass done. It's pretty much impossible to make it side by side through that chicane, and wisely Moeller relented.
On board now with Michael Kondaccioglu in the number 96. And remember, he's tied in the points after he and Barman have each gotten one victory so far this season. On the brakes into the second chicane. Running down on Golzar just a touch. Last time by was a 48.8 to a 49.2 from the race leader. So it's Mercedes versus Mercedes at the front. Kondaccioglu closing.
Now, you mentioned both Kondaccioglu and Barman with a win. They both also have a second place finish, so that's why they are even in points. Both of them not used to finishing outside of the podium, or even the top two for that matter. That's where Kondaccioglu is right now, but he's got a bead drawn on Golzar coming under the bridge. Very defensive there from Golzar. Not going to give the opportunity for Kondaccioglu to slip past.
Golzar looked a little slow, like he was giving up some time maybe for running wide in an area. Remember, you got to keep the car in those white lines. If you run too wide, you could get yourself in trouble with the stewards for extending track limits. So we'll keep an eye on this. Again, Monza's not a place where you can go that wide because of all the gravel traps, but Kondaccioglu and Golzar are going to fight tooth and nail for that top spot into the braking zone for Parabolica.
I'm interested that Kondaccioglu is feeling the need to be so aggressive here early in this race when his nearest championship rival is struggling relative at least to what Kondaccioglu has been able to do. Barman down there in 6th. Nevertheless, we've seen Kondaccioglu make a couple of bold moves to the inside and outside, and here comes another, shoving it up the inside into the first chicane.
Golzar is strangely slowing down in certain gears. I'm not sure why, but they're going to run door-to-door into the first corner. Kondaccioglu gets hit from behind. Blanton gives him a shot through the first chicane, and I think that's message sent that Blanton's now a part of this party.
Yeah, I think so. We probably have ignored him a little bit, and that's unfair on our part. That really backed up Simard, I think, who had to check up, and now, because of that loss of momentum, finds himself under assault from Lucas Moeller here, and it's side by side in that battle for the 4th spot.
Into the second chicane now. It's going to get real tight. The line pinches together with those curbs restricting the apexes. And Simard's going to hang on to it for now, but Lucas Moeller was aggressive, couldn't complete the pass. Go back up to the front.
That might have been his best chance there, too.
Only 7 minutes in, we've got a train formed at the front. I don't think Golzar is the fastest one in this group. He seems like he's losing straightaway speed right at the end of the straightaway, maybe 6th gear, not the right ratio.
Yeah, it does look that way. Something is a little bit strange, but he seems to be down on the top-end speed relative to Kondaccioglu, and that's opened up opportunities like this one. For now, Kondaccioglu has allowed discretion to be the better part of valor, but as we get closer to the end, if status quo remains like this, then I think we're going to see him be a bit more aggressive with those moves.
Slow again for a moment. That 96 car just surges on corner entry. And Golzar's had to go defensive. Blanton and Simard now right back in the fight. The 96 is going to do the crossover here, try to pull that car to the inside. He might have overlap if he can get help from Blanton.
This is an interesting part of the track, that Parabolica corner. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think in general you want to give up the entry to make sure you have a great exit, but you can't compromise too much. And look at this freight train forming down the front straightaway.
Oh, really big dive by the 44. He's going to have to juke to the right. There's a little bit of contact between Blanton and Simard. Oh, the 44 gets turned. Moeller sideways into the gravel.
That's too bad. That's just the whole field accordioning up there in that braking zone, and really hard to lay too much blame there. There might be a call for some avoidable contact penalty, but even still, that's just the nature of that corner here at Monza, and I think the biggest benefactor of that probably is Barman. That's a free position for him up another spot, crucial with that championship hunt in mind.
Front two still remain nose to tail. We'll take you back to GT4 if things get interesting, but this is spectacular stuff at the front of the field. 2 Mercedes in lockstep at the front, and then a Ferrari and a Mercedes behind them. They're still scrapping for 3rd place. Now about a 7-car length gap back to the other Lucas Moeller in the 55 car in 5th.
There's been some speculation behind the scenes that maybe it's a downforce setting thing between Golzar and Kondaccioglu. Perhaps Kondaccioglu a bit more trimmed out, and that's why we're seeing his Mercedes be able to close in some in the straightaways. I think there's probably something to that, in addition just to simply the slipstream. But you're right, when you talked about it, does kind of look like that green Mercedes of Golzar is lurching a little bit at speed, and you see Kondacoglu take chunks out of it. That's very strange, and I'm not sure I have a good sense for what might be causing that particular phenomenon.
Kondacoglu getting up on the AstroTurf on the exit of Parabolica. And going back to the downforce situation, for those that are involved in motorsports or watch motorsports quite a bit, you understand that situation very well. But for those that aren't aware, basically those big wings you see on the back of the car, it's essentially an airplane wing turned upside down. It pushes the car into the ground versus lifting it up. And if you basically set that to be fully straight so that the air isn't acting on it, it just goes straight out the back of the car. And you don't get that aerodynamic push into the ground, but it makes your car a lot faster in a straight line. There's a trade-off, and at a track like this, that trade-off is a lot more apparent than at other places.
That's a great point. Everything in racing is about compromise. Anytime you make a gain, it's going to come at the cost of something else. But oftentimes, when you're making these changes, your gain is bigger than what you're giving up, and that's why you see them do it. And so trying to find that perfect balance between the grip to make it through the corners and the slipperiness through the air that you want to have in the long straightaways here at Monza, that's the real engineering challenge, and it certainly carries over into Assetto Corsa. They've done a great job of modeling all of that, and it puts a lot of focus on the setups that these guys are putting together and all the prep work they do in the build-up to these races.
Into Ascari for Golzar. Bit more curbing for Kondacoglu. Again, you can be pretty aggressive on the curbs around here. They're not super tall, with the exception of the yellow and black painted ones that I already mentioned. Those are mounted perpendicular to the racing surface and do more to launch your car in the air than they do to let the track or the driver know that they're at the track's edge. Moving back a little bit in the field, I would like to just touch briefly on the GT4 leaders. They are separated by 2.5 seconds. Would just like to take you back here to show you're not missing much. The battle right now, I think, is going to stay in GT3 for the time being.
Eleanor Cavillon doing what she has done much of the season, winning both of the races so far. Holds a lead of just over 2 seconds, though, over Caleb John Lavender. This is about as close as anyone has been able to be on a consistent basis to Cavillon. So especially as we get into the multi-class part of this, when the GT3 frontrunners start to come through the GT4 field, that might provide some opportunities for Lavender to try and make a push.
Oh, Kondacoglu made a mistake. He's dropped back a little ways from Golzar this time through, right into the clutches of Cody Blanton and Philippe Simard. So moving back up to our top category into the second chicane. It looks like this is going to sort of stick here for now. I don't think we're going to see a lot of shuffling. It looks like Chris Bruno in the 909 has picked up a 15-second time penalty in that FCP Euro Champion Motorsports Pro entry.
Going back to our discussion about the Mercedes versus the Ferrari, and we're getting some great information in our chat behind the scenes, so big thanks to everyone who's contributed to that. One of the big differences between the two is how they make their speed, and as we can see, the Ferrari is certainly capable of running the same lap times as the Mercedes, faster in fact over the course of a single lap in qualifying. But that car, relative to the Mercedes, at least in this BOP configuration, evidently is a lot more aero-dependent, doesn't have the same kind of straight-line power that the Mercedes has. And while we would expect normally over the course of a long race for the fuel consumption and tire consumption, maybe more importantly for our purposes, of the Mercedes to start to cause a problem and maybe bring the Ferrari a little bit further, because we have a multi-class race on our hands here, there is more benefit probably in having the straight line speed to make the multi-class passes. That said, here comes the Ferrari, and clearly the prancing horse has some legs. Meanwhile, it's side-by-side for the lead, Kyle.
Oh, big dive for Kondacoglu on drivers left into turn number 1. They're going to be door-to-door through the chicane, bumping over the curb, and Golzar hangs on with drivers right. That's the place you want to be through there. An epic battle into the first corner, and Blanton and Simard are still not done. They're going to remain nose-to-nose as they sweep through Curva Grande towards that second chicane.
I think Simard ought to get this done. He's got the inside line here, but he needs to be able to stay up alongside that Mercedes. I'm sorry, he's actually now stuck on the outside here for this chicane. Oh, and forced into that curb.
Zamard off the racetrack to the inside. Meanwhile, for the lead, Golzar might have picked up some damage. We're hearing he might have gotten into the wall. There's some traffic up ahead. Kondachilou sweeps to the right through Lesmo number 2 and almost had a run to take that lead, but now he's wide at the exit.
Looked like there would be a chance. We do have some traffic up ahead. That might throw a spanner into the works here as well. And that was some bold stuff from Kondachilou, trying to make it stick around the outside in the chicane, and Golzar just was not interested in relenting. Can't say I blame him, but that put them both in a compromised position.
Watch this gain here. It's 3 car lengths as they continue to run down towards Parabolica. And right here, towards the end of the straight, it's going to close up. Now 2 car lengths, now 1 car length, and now nothing as Kondachilou is right on top of the 14 into Parabolica and going to get that run on the exit into the slipstream once more. So they're pretty even through the corners, but it's on the end of the straights that Kondachilou gains.
That's right, which has led us to believe that the downforce difference might be there. There's some thought that there could be some damage as well. Maybe they've got different gearing. The lunging could just be them shifting at different points. That's my new best guess on the situation. Here comes the move down the outside again. Carbon copy of the last lap, and again some contact, and around goes Golzar.
Oh, right into Samard as well.
Taken out as well.
Oh, man, that's disastrous for Golzar. The damage that he had, it can only be worse now as he drops out of the lead, and that will put, I think Kondachilou was the one that came out on top of that. Blanton got through as well, or did Blanton? No, it's going to be Kondachilou, Blanton, and now Lucas Muller in the 55. Here comes up the inside Barman on Philippe Samard into the second chicane. They're going to make contact, and now the 191 spins.
Oh my goodness, Barman had found himself in a perfect position, because I suspect there's a penalty coming for Kondachilou due to that contact. We'll have to let our stewards take a look at it and make their decision. But I thought that then was going to put Barman basically up onto the podium with his championship rival mired back due to that penalty. Instead, now problems for Barman, and we reshuffle the deck again. What this does, by the way, is open things up once again for any number of other drivers now with a good result here to enter the championship consideration, leaving round 3.
This just got a whole lot more wild. 15 minutes into our 3rd round of the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. Michael Kondachilou was battling the Mercedes of Hamza Golzar. They touched in turn 1, spun around Golzar, and then there was more trouble behind them through the second chicane. Now Lucas Muller in the 55 gets around Blanton. That's for second. And this might be the battle for the lead. With this going on, we'll check back in with a couple of our other drivers. There's Dirk Grunveld in the 136 Corteco car. And Grunveld had a better season last time around in this Spring GT Rivals Championship. I think the competition in general has just really been on another level this season, Ryan. So Grunveld has struggled a little bit to get consistently in the top 5, but he's on his way there right now, running in 7th.
Yeah, that's right. A little bit of trouble there making his way through the GT4 field, but Dirk established himself as one of the sim racers to watch up against the real-world SRO racers back in the GT Rivals season, and has been relatively quiet, to your point, but doing a good job here in this BMW. Not sure this is the platform to have here at Monza, but it's one that he's been pretty committed to over the course of our esports season, both Season 1 and here in Season 2. Here's Jonathan Lee back in 9th, quietly moving up, benefiting from some of the chaos we've seen.
Colin Johnson is just behind him in one of the Bentley GT3s, which I always love to see. And there in behind him is Lucas Muller in the 44. We documented his spin earlier at the exit at turn number 1 as they come around some of the GT4 traffic. But Jonathan Lee having a pretty quiet day, as you mentioned, not a scratch on that car. I'm sure he'd like to keep it that way. And let's check in on our FCP guys, the 72 and 71. Haven't talked a whole lot about them yet today. For Nate Vincent, running down in 37th, not a great start, but got the car repaired. And the 71 car of Herzen is up in 20th place right now, behind Jason Alexandridis by about 5 seconds. A little wide.
Great job by, whoa, Michael goes on a wild ride there, but you can see his car control skills on full display. Some of our real-world SRO America drivers, Michael Herzen, his teammate, and the racing motorsports manager at FCP Euro, Nate Vincent, who's also in this field. Nate telling me that he and Michael are going to be racing together next year, so stepping away from the touring car category. And we expect them to be sharing a car in some capacity. He couldn't tell me any more than that, but exciting news that FCP Euro will be back on the grid after taking a bit of a COVID-19 enforced hiatus here in 2020.
Troy Barman, a drive-through penalty. And this can only be, can only assume is from the contact that was had a couple laps ago. So he goes through pit lane and will serve that penalty and carry on, but the chance to win this race has essentially gone out the window. He rejoins the track in, looks like, 16th place.
Well, that's costly for sure. One of our championship contenders, and has had his race really come undone, and now it's just about trying to salvage some kind of result, get some points, and move on to the next one.
Race leader in some pretty heavy GT4 traffic, Kondacioglu out front, leads by 1.3 seconds, and now has the GT4 field to work through. And this is one of the easier tracks, in my opinion, to run multi-class racing at because there's so much straightaway, and GT3 and GT4 cars differ so much. And as I say that, man, that was almost a disaster. I think the biggest issue you're going to have here, Ryan, is what side of the racetrack do the GT4 cars end up on? There's a lot of transitions from right to left here. And when you transition, maybe the GT3 drivers will try to anticipate how soon that transition will happen from one side of the track to the other, and sometimes you get it just a little wrong.
That's right, especially if you're in a battle of your own. It's sometimes hard to be constantly checking the mirrors or the rear-facing camera, as is the case in some instances in these cars, and thereby know where you need to position yourself for the other class to come through. And this is one of the areas where the performance difference is going to be pretty massive. Under braking, not as much downforce. Downforce, of course, really helps with the speed retardation. So the GT4 cars, not as good under braking. They also just don't have as sophisticated ABS, and the brake packages are not at the same level as you see in the GT3 cars. Interesting to note, look at that top of the leaderboard, Kondacioglu with the red DT by his name. That's what I was afraid of. That contact racing for the lead will lead to a drive-through penalty. So both of our championship leaders tied coming in now will have had to serve drive-throughs in the first 25 minutes of this race.
Oh man, so some drama for Kondacioglu and for the blanking on the name now. The other driver, we had Barman at the front of the field. For Lucas Muller in the 55, this is now going to be the battle for the lead with Muller and Philippe Simard. Remember, Simard started on the pole, fell back to fourth by the end of the first lap. He might get an opportunity to battle 1v1 with this red Mercedes for the lead.
Well, and Simard was caught out in that contact there back in the first chicane not so long ago. Also, as I recall, Golzar's spin maybe tagged that Ferrari just a little bit, and I don't know if it sustained any damage. We haven't had a good look at the car since then, but he definitely had to go off track in an evasive maneuver, and a good result here would definitely bring Simard back into the championship conversation. I think he had 30 points coming into this round. Our championship leaders had 56, so you could definitely make up some ground here with a good result. It doesn't even have to be a win. And I think both of our Lucas Mullers also have put themselves in a position to benefit here. And Lucas with a C at the moment, out in front effectively, the de facto leader of this race, but he's got his hands full of that Ferrari.
I'm just shocked that Simard has this Ferrari as competitive as it is. I mean, you look at the order here, there are no other Ferraris in the top 20 right now. So I think Simard took a chance here. He's going to stick with the car that he's been running all season, sort of locked into it actually. And he's making it work. He set this car up to be a rocket ship in a straight line. And he looks a little better on the brakes than Muller. So I think Simard, if we can get some traffic, that might be an advantage for the Ferrari 42 car.
That's an interesting point. I agree. It is better under braking, and I think perhaps the maybe more sophisticated or more advantageous, I should say, downforce in this current BOP setting that the Ferrari seems to have. As we talked about earlier, it seems to be making its lap time more through the high-speed corners and through the cornering, whereas the Mercedes has its strength in the straight line. And there was some thought that, conventional wisdom would say you want to have that grunt, that punch, to drive through the other class traffic. But I think you're right. Under braking, the Ferrari looks really good. It's really nimble in those chicanes. And if you catch traffic at the right time, the Ferrari might be able to take advantage of that and pounce and take the lead.
Speaking of taking advantage of situations, if you're watching at home right now, you should take advantage of the giveaways that Asus and Fanatec have going on with GT World Challenge America. Head to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or in the YouTube chat below to enter to win one of 2 Asus and Fanatec sim rigs with the RTX 3080 and some AMD CPUs that are paired up together. And let me tell you, I can speak from experience that those 2 things together are a beautiful combination, so make sure that you enter. And thanks again for our partners at Asus, Republic of Gamers and Tough Gaming, and at Fanatec for providing those giveaways at the GT World Challenge America social media channels. So 35 minutes to go. We're closing in on the halfway point of this race. We've had quite a bit of action here, but it seems like it's died down a little bit. So now we think about the long game. Muller and Samard separated by about a second, maybe a second and a half. What does Samard do to get back up there? He's lost the slipstream, it looks like.
I think you just got to be patient. He lost that gap primarily due to traffic, and those things tend to even out over the course of a race. 35 minutes left, still plenty of time. We know there's speed in that Ferrari, and I think if he can get some clean track, he was on pole by a good margin, over 0.3 of a second, and that was not relative to Muller either. Muller qualified quite a bit further down the order. The advantage from Samard to Muller was probably closer to a half a second or even more, if memory serves. And so, put on an even playing field, on a clean track, I think Samard will be able to make up that distance, but of course that's not what we have. We have a lot of traffic for them to deal with, and that's going to make it fun for us and a bigger challenge for Philippe to close that gap. But I think a little bit of patience will get the job done, and also we expect the Ferrari to be better on the long run than the Mercedes. The word is it's a little bit easier on tires, and that could be another thing to keep an eye on.
Speaking of the long run, I'm watching Brian Heitkotter in this number 5, and at the start of the race we were surprised he didn't climb up more spots, as it looks like Kadachulu has hit pit lane, so he will serve that penalty. Brian Heitkotter, though, in the Nissan GTR Nismo GT3, runs 4th now, and I would not count him out. I think that would be a mistake to do that. Last time by a 1:49.545, which is a little slower than those ahead of him, but Blanton is right there, and he can latch onto that slipstream and bring Carl Wimmer with him in the 22 Acura NSX GT3. This is a great one for Carl in a car that I didn't think would be super competitive this week, but here he is.
Yeah, that's been the conventional wisdom there, that the NSX might not be the package to have here, but like I talked about back in qualifying, there actually are some Italian roots to the Acura/Honda NSX. A lot of its running has been done, at least outside of Japan and the US, in Italy in various Italian championships with, it's alternately pronounced Yaz or Jazz or something along those lines, JAS, a big time team there in Italy that does a lot of the development work, is the factory team for the NSX in Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli, and does some racing in the SRO series in Europe as well. So there is actually that Italian connection for the Japanese car that was primarily developed in the States by Honda Performance Development. But anyway, it's really cool to see, with that in mind, this car running so well. And in that red livery, it kind of resembles a Ferrari a little bit. It looks like it should be at home here at Monza.
You'd be forgiven for making that mistake when it's driving by so fast, running in 5th place right now. Muller leads Samard by 1.0 seconds. Cody Blanton 3rd, Heitkotter, then Whitmer. The rest of your top 5. Going back to GT4 because it's been quiet for a little while. We'll take you back there and see what's going on. And Cavillon in the number 56 leads by, looks like 10 seconds over Caleb John Lavender. And this is just par for the course. This season, Cavillon has been so good. And even though Caleb John Lavender started strong, a bit of a drop-off of pace for this 999.
And I think that corresponds to the GT4 field, the front of the GT4 field being caught by the front of the GT3 field. I suspect that some of the ground lost came in traffic, but that is an assumption on my part. We didn't see it. That said, Cavillon has been so consistent based on what we've seen so far, and really seems very unlikely to make mistakes. It's been quite impressive, and there's a reason that she's been picked up by the SRO Esports team. John Alesi, the former Formula One driver, one Grand Prix win to his credit, several times on the podium, 32 in fact, and had a remarkable Formula One career, did some sports car racing, and now hands-on in the esports realm as well. And it's quite an esports academy that he's put together, and a Norcavion part of that. That really tells you everything you need to know about this driver's talent level.
Cavion leads by 10 seconds over Caleb John Lavender. Then it's Juan Reynoso in the number 90. Then Simon Fisher and Cameron Cinsano. They're having a pretty good scrap for, looks like, 4th in class. Fisher going a bit defensive. Cinsano in that blue and black Mercedes up the outside through the Lesmos.
It's a great battle here through this part of the track. Look at that. Just nose to tail, and it's not done yet through the second part of the Lesmos section.
A bit of a wobble for Cinsano at the exit of the second Lesmo on the run to Ascari. The GT4 cars, I feel like carrying momentum is a bit more important in these. You don't have quite as much power as the GT3 cars, down about 100 to 150 horsepower from those other machines that they're sharing the racetrack with. So keeping speed up in the corners is so important. You might square them off a little bit, Ryan, brake earlier, and try to get the throttle down sooner.
That has to be the theory and the strategy at this point. Awfully close here, close enough to make a move. I'm not sure. I think this is going to have to wait for just a moment. But Cinsano looking to prove me wrong. Ultimately tucks back in line and now trying to get a great exit here from the Parabolica.
Turned down on exit to try to throttle up and did just that. So Cinsano's going to close, and this will be enough momentum, I think, to carry that slipstream. That Porsche is not a big car, though. The Mercedes still poking out from behind it in the slipstream. There it goes to driver's right. And Cinsano and Fisher battling for 4th in class, side by side down towards turn 1. Whoa, a little wide. Cinsano in the curbing, going to bounce up over. Did Cinsano cut the racetrack? That's the bigger question. I think he got away with it, and we'll get back in line in 5th place.
Now, one thing that ACC does really well is even if you do abuse those track limits a little bit, but you don't gain anything from it, there's really not a massive penalty there. So I think that was pretty self-defeating. Certainly nothing gained by that maneuver, and this battle resumes anew.
Big jump for the 595 of Fisher up over the second chicane curbing. Back up in 2nd place, Philippe Simard has lost some ground to Muller. It's 1.8 seconds between the 2 front runners right now. Closer battle is going on between Chris Bruno and Lucas Muller in the 44, who's charged back through the field after the spin in turn number 1. And Bruno in the FCP Euro-sponsored 909 Champion Motorsports car is now going to have to go defensive here to maintain this spot.
That's right, the Ferrari, not the only Italian mark represented on our field. We've got the Raging Bull, the Lamborghini Huracan here, but a great charge up the inside and a great recovery here from Muller.
Oh, that's Carl Whitmer. Whitmer's gone around to the front straightaway in a strange spot to be crashed.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like we have to go back and have a look here at what had happened to Carl Whitmer. This might take a moment, but Carl Whitmer in the 22 with fairly significant damage from whatever crash he just had. And I wonder if there was an incident on the front straightaway that led to this. Here is a look. It was behind Heitkotter and one of the GT4 cars, and oh, he gets hooked by that Porsche and sends hard into the wall. What an impact for the 22.
That's a case, I think, of the GT4 driver not knowing that there was a second GT3 car coming through. Thought he was clear to move back on the racing line, and just was not. That is really unfortunate for Whitmer, who was putting in a great run here in this NSX at a track that we're being told tends to be one of the better European circuits, if not the best, for the NSX because of its straight line speed potential. But I think that has been compromised now due to the damage it sustained.
That was a heavy impact for Carl Whitmer. Back rolling in 10th place right now. We move forward to Lucas Muller and Chris Bruno. They've actually swapped positions. 44 now, 909 behind. I think Lucas is obviously faster than where he's running right now, so he should continue to climb forward. It's 10 seconds to find Brian Heitkotter with 26 minutes to go. I think that's a bit much to assume that he'll get there, but he might be able to have that gap or more.
Keep in mind, you can see it next to Bruno's name, that red square that says plus 15S. That means a 15-second time penalty because there's no pit stops here in this series. That's going to be assessed after the race. So anyone within 15 seconds of Bruno at the finish will get to vault that Lamborghini in the finishing order. So right now he's just trying to build as big of a gap as he can to minimize that damage when it is incurred. Interesting, Simard has lost even more ground now, down 2.5 seconds off of Muller. I am surprised by that, I have to say.
So Muller leads by 2.5 seconds, as you just mentioned, Ryan, and I am intrigued by that, to say the least. Whoa, big jump for, I think that's Heidkotter that just took a huge slam over the curbing. And he'll get back on the racetrack, but give up quite a bit of time.
That's great news for Blanton, because Heidkotter was breathing down his neck, just a couple tenths behind during the last time where they crossed a timing loop. And looks like something might be wrong with Heidkotter's car, because he is not back up to speed. Or is that Forsberg? That would explain that. That would be the sister car that has the same livery. I think that might have been Forsberg there.
Yes, so it was indeed Chris Forsberg. And so Muller in this 44, running about 10 seconds back from Heidkotter. There's a tight battle going on for third place. To take you there, but I can't get my camera control, so I think I'm gonna solve that issue in the meantime. We'll take a halfway break here, Ryan, and with 2.6 seconds between Simard and Muller, your thoughts on if Simard can get back to the front without help from someone behind?
I thought that would be the case. I thought we would see Simard be able to charge and take chunks out of that time from Muller due to the pace we saw in qualifying. Simard well clear of this field in that attempt in qualifying, set a time that was 0.3 of a second faster than second place and considerably faster than the rest of the field. And that's kind of where Muller fell following qualifying, kind of right there in the middle. And that really hasn't been the case. So that makes me wonder if perhaps Muller just did not get a clean lap in qualifying and actually had more pace than we got to see. Or perhaps the car is just really, really good in race trim relative to the Ferrari. Maybe the conventional wisdom that we talked about earlier as well, that the Mercedes extra punch a little bit better in a straight line helps to knife through the GT4 traffic relative to the Ferrari. It's hard to say, but there is the gap. You can see it visually, and it is closing a little bit here in traffic. Now Simard has one car in between himself and the leader, Muller, and that is one of the FCP Euro Mercedes from the GT3 field. So it should be a little bit harder to make that pass.
That was the 72 car of Nate Vincent, who I was going to check in on in a moment. And Vincent running in 31st right now. I love something about this FCP Euro livery, just does something for me, Ryan. That's a great design that fits on that car very well. And again, we don't know what the plans are for 2021, but I'd say I'd love if they did this. This would be cool looking for sure, but not a great day for Nate Vincent, but for teammate Michael Herzen, 17th and battling with Hamza Golzar. I think Golzar might be on the attack around this 71 car, though.
Yeah, this is the comeback drive. Golzar did not qualify on pole, but led the first lap after a less than ideal start for Philippe Simard, and actually Golzar led most of the front half of this race, but battling for the lead with Michael Condacciolo, who's now in the 13th spot. There was contact, sent both cars into a spin, certainly, actually sent Golzar into a spin. Condacciolo was able to continue. That set off a chain reaction that sent some cars spinning a little bit further back, and now Golzar trying to recover and get a decent finish, but he's got his hands full right now with that FCP Euro car just up ahead.
Big tank slapper, one of the Astons hard in the fence. That is, I believe, one of the GT4 drivers. That's Joseph Kostovich, who just had a big impact exiting the second Lesmo.
Oh, that's a shame. That's normally a beautiful-looking race car. It looks a bit worse for the wear right now. It's been fun to see how the GT4 program for Aston Martin has really taken off in North America, and I've got to give Cy Jerry and his CJR group a lot of credit for that. They've taken over this year as the new distributor for Aston Martin in North America, their new partner, and by all accounts have just done a great job supporting all the customer teams in the States, and I think that's a big reason why we've seen the explosion of GT4 Astons on the grid. They had a really successful year as well, racing here in the U.S. Michael Dinan, what he was able to do in a Flying Lizard entry along with Robbie Foley for the Sprint X races in Pirelli GT4 America, but also by himself in the sprint races. It really was a banner year for Aston Martin in a lot of respects, and I think a lot of positive things coming down the pipeline.
One driver that is here today is Dylan Archer in the number 32 McLaren 720, and I love this race car, and good to see Dylan Archer here. I believe he's got some experience in Trans Am, I think was what he's currently running, as he sits 8th behind Colin Johnson in the Bentley right up ahead. And this McLaren is a very slippery looking machine and is probably fairly good on the straightaways, especially behind that big tall Bentley in front of him.
Nothing like the Trans Am car that he drives, racing in the TA2 category. It's a really cool story, actually, and if that last name sounds familiar, there's a reason. He is the son of Bobby Archer and nephew of Tommy Archer, both of whom have had a lot of success racing in various paddocks in North America, including what used to be known as Pirelli World Challenge, now SRO America, as well as Trans Am. As far as Dylan is concerned, he is someone who did some racing when he was younger, competed in karts from ages 4 to 6, drove some kind of entry-level oval racing cars, Bandoleros and Legends cars, until he was about 10 years old, but has not had the opportunity to race an actual car since then, until 2020, when he went off and did the Trans Am thing, finished 8th in the TA2 category in 2020. So definitely has the bloodlines, doesn't have a ton of experience, but doing a great job both in the real world and running top 10 here in a very stacked field of sim racers and pro racers.
Up in front, here comes Simard past Muller for the lead. Where did Simard come from? Now he runs wide. Muller crosses him back over. He's way off the racetrack, misses the sausage curb on the exit, but Lucas Muller must have had some traffic that he caught or something. He lost about 2 seconds that lap by, and now Simard's here and ready to play, but that was almost a disaster for Simard. You do not want to drive over the curbing that sits on the exit of Monza. It actually, in the real world, launched a Formula 3 car there a couple of years ago, and they've since removed it, but still omnipresent here in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and Simard went the long way around and gave up the spot again.
Yeah, that was why you saw him hang out there on the outside as long as he did, just to make sure he didn't run afoul of that curb that you've been talking about. Not sure where it's come from, but there is some pace in that Ferrari. 20 minutes remaining, still an eternity if you're Lucas Muller, just trying to hold on to the lead.
And lots of traffic up ahead, both GT3 and GT4 cars in this next grouping. And through the Lesmos with 19 minutes to go, Lucas Muller better get real good at sneaking through traffic with Simard pressuring behind, although you see the Ferrari go run wide up onto the exit curbing and all 4 tires off onto that. That tells me he's pushing.
This is going to be really nasty traffic for both of these guys. It's not just GT4, but GT3 as well. Nose to tail coming down. Ooh, that's a defensive line from Muller.
Now up the outside lane for Simard into Ascari. They single file back out again and head down towards Parabolica. Great run here for Simard. Where does he go?
That's really what it is. It's a chess match at over 100 miles an hour. Look at this, 3 wide up ahead. He's going to try the outside.
Now drivers left, but there's the classic BMW car on the left. He'll have to get back in line again. Oh, man, the 40 or the 55 looked for the inside. Big slip and slide by the Maserati, and through both of them go for the lead. 18 minutes to go and an all-out brawl at the front. Mercedes versus Ferrari.
And check this out. Simard's got a run. He is in the slipstream and should be able to make a maneuver.
3 wide with traffic on the way down to turn number 1. Braking zone now. Mercedes versus Ferrari. Simard pinches. Muller stays up the inside into turn 1, jumps the curbing and keeps the lead.
But got compromised on corner exit there. I don't think Simard got a great run, but it might be enough to keep the pressure on.
This is not the Mercedes versus Ferrari fight you'd think you'd see at Monza, but I'm loving it just as much. 17 and a half minutes to go. It's counting down fast. An FCP Hero car on the left. Braking zone now for the second chicane. Simard trying to build up the momentum again. Great run through here, but Muller pulls away slightly on exit.
Now up into the Lesmos complex here. This is the first leg of it. It's blind. You can't see where you're going because you've got that Armco to the inside. Here's the second leg of it. This one even faster. You've got a bit more camber to work with, using all of that track out to the outside. Beautiful stuff from our top 2 drivers.
Well, the traffic is cleared, and that will let Muller breathe a sigh of relief, but only momentarily, because Simard is now back in that slipstream, and that can keep this Ferrari in tow of the Mercedes, even if the Ferrari doesn't have quite as much straightaway speed, just 1v1.
Well, I think we're going to get a better sense for how the two stack up here on the next handful of laps, because just a moment ago, looking up ahead, it didn't seem like there was a lot of traffic up the road, and it's looking pretty good for the Ferrari. I got to say, he's been able to hang in a straight line. That's step number one. Now getting a great exit from the Parabolica sets you up for another chance, perhaps, into that first chicane.
On the front straightaway, Muller's going to stay on the right, and he'll bleed over to the left just a touch as you look in the mirror and see that Simard is not there. Yeah, now he is. Now he's going to juke back to the right, make Simard go the long way around. Drag race into the braking zone. Both of them hard on the brakes. There's contact, and the 55 is going to spin. Simard slams over the curbing, and he's through to the lead.
The good news for Muller is he's able to get that thing righted. I don't think he hit anything, and with the gap of 10 seconds or so back to Blanton, he's still solidified there in the second spot. Only got that one look at it, Kyle, but to me, that looked like hard racing, door to door, hard to put any blame anywhere. Simard had the pace. It's just a tough place to go side by side with anyone. I would be pretty reticent to hand down a penalty for anything we just saw. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the 55 had to go defensive there. He did just that. He swept to the right, which could be viewed as a block too. So if the 55 cries foul, I'm just not sure that he's got a leg to stand on when he made the first move in the first place to throw the block. So I think that's even. I think we call it there, and I think that's just a racing incident for me. And that's just the way things happen sometimes, running door to door. I think even the 55 might have drifted off the apex before the contact was made. So we'll wait and see what happens, but Simard right now is going to enjoy a 3.8 second lead.
Yeah, one of them racing deals, I think it's safe to say. But that's my look at it. We'll let our stewards take a look, and if you're joining us for the first time or you were unaware, even if you had joined us previously, there are actual human stewards taking a look at all of this that will hand down punishment if they deem it necessary. But the two of us, talking heads, the idiots with the microphones, we think it should be clean and green from here. We'll see. And the good news for Muller is there still is time, and he's got some speed in that Mercedes.
Car off on driver's right, exiting Ascari. It's one of the classic BMW machines. Couldn't quite get a number on it to see which one it was, but trouble afoot for one of them. And going back to that incident, we're hearing for Muller, it was a rear brake locking that might have had that. And again, these cars do have anti-lock brakes, but you can also adjust the brake bias, Ryan. If you shift the bias too much to the rear, you can lock up those rear wheels, and that will send you for a spin, which might have led to the contact.
Yeah, that's a good call. That might have been what caused it, just the back jumping out just a little bit and into the Ferrari, and that would indicate a Mercedes that was already in the process of perhaps spinning on its own even before the contact, which would only solidify the assessment, oh boy, that was close, of just a racing incident.
Chris Bruno spun in turn number one, was battling with Dylan Archer, and looks like Colin Johnson will get through as well. But Bruno gets back up to speed, the tail end of the top 10. Didn't catch what led to that, but my bet would be there was a bit of contact. So with 13 minutes to go, Simard leads by a couple seconds over Muller, but this is going to light the fire under the 55, and I think we're going to see him make a Herculean effort to drive back up to that Ferrari. I think he wants a second go.
Without a doubt, he wants a chance to get back up there and make a run at the Ferrari. I'm not sure he's got the pace to do it, barring any kind of mix-up with lap traffic, and that's definitely going to be a factor before it's all said and done. I think this one hasn't been fully written yet. We've got a couple chapters left to write, most certainly, in the final 12 minutes.
So Muller across the line this time. That was a 48.5 to a 48.414 for the race leader, so not faster. He'll have to be faster and by a fairly significant margin if he wants to have another go at it. There's Dylan Archer up to 7th, a good run for the Archer Brothers Esports car. Colin Johnson, we've talked about a bit today in the number 176 CMS Pro Bentley. Car's running 8th. And Matthew Santiago, a driver we haven't talked about in a very similar looking Bentley, running inside the top 10 as well.
Yeah, great to see the Bentleys having a strong race. They did not have a strong qualifying. We really didn't see them anywhere towards the front. And some of this, without a doubt, has been by virtue of attrition. but that's part of racing. You got to be there at the end to take advantage, and that's exactly what these two have done, running somewhat in formation right there with one another. Sad news out of Bentley, quite frankly, in the last week, that their GT3 program as a factory effort was coming to an end. They continue to support the GT3 customers through the end of the 21 season, but kind of looking at what the future might hold for their racing operations. Really a shame. There's not a car like it, it's safe to say. And I kind of lovingly refer to the Continental as a brick with wings, because that's sort of what it looks like. But despite the appearance, these are truly performance machines. They are so fast. They've been very successful, especially here in North America, where K-Pax Racing has had a ton of success with them. But classic and modern racing over in Europe, as well as the M Sport team, have done a tremendous job and picked up that crucial win at the Liqui Bathurst 12 Hour back in February of this year. Really a big win for the Bentley brand in endurance racing, which is so linked to endurance racing, primarily at Le Mans, especially in the early days of Le Mans, but they've done a lot of good work in GT racing as well.
Having a look at the 33 of Brandon Oulet, who is in a Lamborghini now for Barwell Motorsport. I believe we saw this car turned around on the opening lap in the second chicane. He's fought back to 14th, just got around Dirk Grunveld for that 13th position. And Grunveld, again, at the start that he had today, was running up a little higher earlier, but has fallen back now to 13th place. And just up the road, you see Michael Kondaccioglu in the 96 after serving that penalty, remains in 12th. He might pick up another spot here with Chris Bruno having that 15-second penalty. So Kondaccioglu still capable of grabbing a top 10, but looking at the points, Kondaccioglu and Barman. Where is Barman in the running order right now? He is scored in, let's see, looking down. Where is Barman?
He might be out.
I think he is out of this race, so that will certainly shake up the points situation heading into our fourth round next week, or a couple weeks from now at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca.
Well, that is great news for Kondaccioglu, and I don't know if anyone's on the radio to tell him that Barman has not been able to continue in this race. The way I look at it, he will certainly get 10th. Because of the penalty to Bruno, that gives him one spot, and I think Archer's 10-second penalty, I believe Kondaccioglu is in the window to take advantage of that as well. And certainly if he can keep up the pace we know he's capable of, he should be even closer and really put an end to any discussion about that. So it's not a great result, especially when he was running up towards the top. That drive-through penalty for contact while racing for the lead with Golzar is going to be pretty costly. But he's doing a nice job of trying to salvage something here in what has been otherwise a really difficult race. Really the first time it's been that way for Kondaccioglu through 3 races, 2 championship races, plus the non-championship round, the endurance round at Spa.
My fear for Kondaccioglu is I think you're going to have to be pretty close to perfect to win this FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. And for Kondaccioglu, it's been almost perfect so far, but today is going to be a hit in the standings, maybe not so much to Barman, but to the drivers that are 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the championship. If you lose ground to them here and can't replicate the success of the first 2 rounds, that might be a concern for the number 96. Working over the 909 of Chris Bruno, this is not really that important of a battle because he would get this position regardless due to the time penalty for the 909.
That's true, but if he has any aspirations of picking up more spots, he's got to go ahead and get this done. Still 8 minutes to work with. It's a ways up the road to try and get to Lee. About 5 seconds up the road is where Lee sits, currently running in the 10th spot. And you also want to make sure you stay within that window to take advantage of Archer's penalty. So I think that's why you did see a little bit of urgency, at least from Kondaccioglu, to get that pass done. And credit to Bruno there for not fighting too hard. I think recognizing where he stands in the big scheme of things with that penalty and not wanting to have a huge influence on the outcome of the race for those that are not subjected to post-race penalties.
Here's Dirk Grunveld in the Corteco car with Brandon Oulet beginning to run him back down. They were close a few laps ago, separated, and now they're kind of reclosing that gap. Oulet a little faster last time by 1.3 seconds. I say a little faster, that's a lot faster. Through Lesmo 2, closes that gap further. And we talked about the M6 maybe not being the perfect platform for this racetrack, but the Lamborghinis are running okay with Bruno up the road and Oulet and Marlowe kind of sharing the bottom half of the top 15.
That was a good memory earlier, referencing the fact that Ulay had that issue early in the race, maybe even back on the first lap, but it certainly was very early. He's one that we anticipate to run towards the top 10 for sure, and barring that issue, certainly would have found himself in the top 10, doing a good job to recover, and hopefully can take advantage of that Bruno penalty. That's certainly what he's thinking at this point, but still, the task at hand is to try and find a way past this M6.
Oh, big bobble for Ulay. Missed that sausage curve, which we just passed. That was the one I warned a couple drivers about earlier, was if you hit that thing, it'll send you airborne. Meanwhile, up the road, Heitkotter is reeling in Cody Blanton. Last time by was 4/10 better, and Heitkotter in the past has gotten faster throughout the race, and it seems like that trend is continuing here today. Although this season has been admittedly a bit of a struggle for Heitkotter in comparison to the GT Rivals Championship in the spring, but now has that thing inside the top 5 with 5.5 minutes to go.
I think this is his best showing thus far, to be honest, and the fact that we've had to wait this long does come as a surprise. Does not appear to have the pace to run at the very front, but Brian Heitkotter, as we talked about, is so experienced. He was really at the forefront of the sim racing to real-world racing phenomenon, winning the GT Academy competition that helped place him in some Nissan-powered race cars all around the world in the real world, but got his start, of course, racing in sim racing. And as a consequence, with that wealth of experience, he just does not make mistakes. We did see him hopping over a curb earlier, and that came as a big surprise to me, because going back to GT Rivals, it seemed like no matter how much pressure he was under, he was inch perfect and just unrelenting in his pursuit of a good lap time. And it was very difficult to make any kind of pass on him. He just didn't provide any opportunities for that. So that's serving him well here in this race when perhaps the outright speed isn't there. He's been consistent enough to take advantage of others' mistakes and finds himself now trying to race his way up onto the podium here in the final 5 minutes.
So getting some information from behind the scenes with 4.5 minutes to go. If this race were to end exactly as it is, looks like Kondacioglu would have a 1-point lead over Lucas with a K Muller. Barman will fall to third, 11 points back from the championship lead. So that'll be a disastrous round for Barman, especially with a driver as good as Kondacioglu and how he's been able to minimize his penalty, where Barman's sort of ended up with him out of the race. This championship is going to be a 7-round battle all the way to the end. And if you don't maximize your bad days, I don't think you're going to be the champion. And it looks like Kondacioglu has sort of done that, and he should retain the lead of the championship leading Monza.
He's been running down Lee as well for another spot. We believe he'll pick up a spot on Archer when that penalty is assessed. I think he's got a chance to catch Lee and get 10th on the road outright as well. So that could potentially move him up as high as 9th, I believe, as it runs right now. And that would be crucial just to try and, as you said, maximize the points on a bad day. He had a chance to race for the lead and was doing so earlier. That went out the window with the contact and the drive-through penalty, and now you're just trying to salvage whatever is still out there to be salvaged. And all credit to Kondacioglu, he has done a pretty good job of doing exactly that.
So with 3.5 minutes left to go in this race, Philippe Simard leads by 7.3 seconds. He has just shot out in front and has not looked back. And this should be about 2 laps to go. We should get the white next time by. So Simard, with his lead and the issues for the 55 of Muller down in turn 1 with the spin that they had after the contact, this is looking pretty safe for Philippe Simard to pick up a victory here.
I should point out, this all just got turned on its head. As we say this, there's the 10-second penalty for that contact. I was wondering about this. I was about to say we had never had confirmation that there was not going to be a penalty from the contact. You and I both agreed that I think we would have, admittedly, we only saw it the one time, and our stewards had a better look at it than we did. But I was under the impression that that was the kind of contact that she would let go and boil down to a racing incident. I'd be very curious to see it again. Ultimately, our stewards have elected to hand out a 10-second penalty. So Simard, now seeing this, is going to on the attack to try and build as much of a margin as possible. He is pulling away from Muller, but I'm not sure it's by enough to secure the win. Still a little bit of time to try and build on that. The good news is Heitkotter, who has now gotten around Blanton, by the way, for third, is too far back, as it stands at least, to take advantage of that penalty.
So what we're hearing is that, again, we didn't get a great look at it. Samard turned in on Moeller. That caused the contact, and that is why the penalty has been assessed. So Samard with 1 lap to go this time by. It should be white flag. We'll see if we get it, or if I think we might get 2 to go. No white at the line this time, so we might get 2 more. But Samard leads by 7.6 seconds over Moeller. And Moeller's got pretty clear racetrack ahead of him as well. So if I'm Moeller, I'm feeling pretty good about this right now, but you have to stay on the attack. Don't make any mistakes, and don't let Samard pull farther ahead to solidify that lead.
This is an interesting one for Samard because if I'm remembering this correctly, you do not necessarily have to see the white flag. If he were to hold up, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, he would get the checkered flag as long as the clock was all at zeros.
Yes.
At the end of this lap. And ordinarily, when you're up by 7 seconds, you would want to do that. But I think he's going to try and push here with the hope of getting another lap and somehow something happening to Moeller, giving him a 10-second cushion, which is, again, the opposite of what you would normally see in this scenario, but that penalty changes everything.
Well, he gained a little bit. Now it's 8 seconds even. Lesmo 2 for Samard. It's going to be a race back to the flag, though, because I'm not convinced he can get there before the checkers falls. So this is a race not only against the 55 in the clock, it's against the clock itself for the number 42. He was the pole sitter earlier in this race, got kind of pushed around and fell back to 4th, clawed his way back to the front. Then the contact with the leader has put him in this position now. Philippe Samard leads by 8 seconds. Can he get back and make 1 more lap, or will it be checkers? And Moeller would get the victory if that were to be the scenario.
A lot of traffic up ahead. I think it could help him with a slipstream, but look at that. Clock says 0 all of a sudden. So I think that this is going to be the final lap as it turns out. And I don't think he's got enough of a buffer, but we'll have to wait for more to come around.
That's it. Checkered flag. Samard crosses the line first, but that does not mean he's won the race. Lucas Moeller comes on through the gap at the line, 8.6 seconds. That means that Lucas Moeller will come on through after the contact in turn 1. He will win the 3rd round of the GT World Challenge America Esports Championship by FCP Euro. Brian Heitkotter, he'll end up on the podium as well. Cody Blanton, 4th. Lucas Moeller, the other Lucas Moeller, will come home in 5th, and Nick McMillan in 6th. Colin Johnson, Matthew Santiago, Jonathan Lee, and Dylan Archer, the top 10. Oh, the drama, Ryan. That's going to be an interesting one.
It is, and I am looking forward to going back to see that replay if it is true that there was a bit of an early turn-in from Samard that led to the spin. Then I can see why the stewards would make that decision. It's just such a tough corner to be side-by-side in. I talked about it at the start of the broadcast. You really need to cooperate when you're passing through there. There's no other way to do it cleanly. There's just not enough room. So I think we saw a little bit of that. 2 drivers not wanting to give an inch, and why would they? You're fighting for the race win, effectively, at that point. So a shame to see it end the way that it did. I don't think Lucas Moeller cares. He's going to happily take this race win any way he can get it. That totally revives his championship hopes, and it's a big win as well for the Haupt Racing Team, owned by Hubert Haupt, a driver in his own right. That is a real-world racing team that has taken over from Black Falcon for Mercedes-AMG with a lot of their factory programs, especially at the Nürburgring, and great to see them have some success. They've really bought into the esports thing. They use their esports drivers to help their real-world drivers out, and the esports team with a big, big win here at Monza.
And Philippe Samard, although he crossed the line first and may not win this race, he did earn the CrowdStrike fastest lap, a 1:47.958 for him. That will put him at the top of the list in terms of lap times for this race. But Lucas Moeller is confirmed as the race winner in the 55, and as things shake out, it looks like Philippe Samard will jump down to, it looks like 2nd place will be where he ends up after this one. So in just a moment, we'll show you the race results here and kind of run down the order. We didn't even talk about GT4 at the end with all the drama surrounding GT3, but it looks like Honor Cavillon again in the 56 got another victory. Caleb John Lavender a long ways back. So the GT4 fight pretty calm today, Ryan. That's kind of been par for the course this season.
Well, I would say there was a pretty good race there early on in GT4. Lavender did a good job to keep Honor honest, but what more can you say? She has been outstanding every single round of this championship, including the non-points race at Spa, the endurance race. Honor was really good there as well. This time taking home the win by over 30 seconds, 37 seconds between first and second. Total domination for the SRO Esports Academy team driver.
So back to GT3 briefly. Muller, Simard, Heitkotter are your top three. Then Cody Blanton, Lucas Muller in the number 44. He comes home in fifth. Then Nick McMillan, Colin Johnson, Santiago, Lee Kondaccioglu comes home in ninth. And a rebound for sure, Ryan. Not the win that he might have had, but a top 10 regardless is going to alleviate what could have been a disaster, especially with Barman not finishing this race, and he'll tumble down to third in the standings.
Yeah, that's right. And I thought maybe Kondaccioglu would be able to pull in Lee, but Lee was able to hold him off by just over a second. So it was tightening up there at the end. That is one driver, Lee, that was thrilled that we got the checkered flag when we did. It was so close with Simard coming around, but ultimately not quite fast enough to earn an additional lap there at the end before time expired. That might have been actually a good thing in the end when we look back to this, because I don't think Simard would have been able to pull out enough of a gap to win even with that penalty, and it probably deprived Kondaccioglu of another spot, and that could be a big point of emphasis in the points as we get further along in the season.
We've got Honor Cavillon waiting for us to talk to in the post-race interviews here, so let's chat with our GT4 winner first and have a little conversation here. Honor, welcome back to Victory Lane. It's been another really solid round for you to come home in Victory Lane by 37 seconds. It looked easy out there, as it always does for you, but I'm sure with the GT3 traffic, it was pretty chaotic.
No, not really, actually. Most of them actually were fairly patient in passing me, so was mostly fine.
Tell me a little bit about Monza, because this is a big place for the GT4 cars, Honora. It's a lot of straightaway and a lot of braking zones. What were the differences between the GT4 cars as you passed them? Did you notice that the Porsche was particularly better in any situation, or were they all fairly even on the straights here at Monza?
No, it seemed fairly even to me, actually. So, actually, the biggest difference between GT4 and GT3, I think, is the acceleration out of the corners, because with the GT4 and the GT3, it's pretty much the same thing in the corners when it comes to inputs.
Honor, congratulations on grabbing another victory here. Best of luck to you at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca next week. That'll be where we head for our fourth round. Good luck to you out there.
Thanks.
To move on now to Lucas Muller, who is our winner in GT3. That was a wild one in the 55 after the contact with Philippe Simard. You bring it home, get yourself a victory. First of all, congratulations. Walk me through that battle you had with Philippe, the contact, and then charging back to just stay within that 10-second margin to take a victory.
First of all, thank you very much. A little bit unexpected, I guess. I mean, the race was quite messy, some contacts here and there, and especially I had quite some bad luck with the traffic, which Felipe hadn't. So I lost quite a lot of time there. But then he closed the gap because of the lap cars. But yeah, then we made contact. I was a little bit angry about it, but I just thought to myself, just keep it clean, keep calm, and try to minimize the gap, which in the end gave me your first victory.
Take me back to the start of the race, the run down to turn number one. I was amazed that everyone got through there without running into each other. How much talking and how much agreement went into maybe not getting in over your head into the first corner? It seemed like everyone had sort of gotten on the same strategy of let's not run into each other down there. Was there any sort of pre-race conversation about that, or was it all just everyone doing an amazing job and coming out unscathed?
I mean, Monza, especially turn 1, 2 at the start of the race, doesn't matter which cars or how many people are in there. It's always quite close because of the natural speed of the corner, because it's quite low speed. But yeah, I mean, I think every driver wants to made it through to T1 and 2. So I guess all were quite cautious, which made me quite happy, because if you're not in the, like exactly at the front or exactly at the back, it's always a little bit tricky. Because if you are just in the mix and someone spins or you get hit, you can't do that much. So yeah, I'm quite happy that it ended like it ended.
Well, Lucas, congratulations. Best of luck to you next week at Laguna Seca. You're now firmly in the championship hunt as well, up at the top of the order. So best of luck to you there, and we'll see you for round 4 in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ryan, we're going to move on back to kind of debriefing here the third round of the season from Monza. Final thoughts on this race. It was an absolute blast. Lots of battles, but also lots of drama with the penalties and the context associated with them.
That's right. You definitely don't want races to be decided by penalties, but sometimes the stewards are not left with a choice. It comes down to the drivers behaving themselves to prevent themselves from finding us in that situation, and that's where we were. That said, Lucas Muller drove a great race, really impressive what he was able to do. Both Lucas Mullers actually had really strong races here today. And it's definitely going to be a shakeup in the points. Any thought of someone running away with it, leaving Monza, which probably was a possibility should one of our two contenders, Barman and Kondaccioglu, have struggled while the other one excelled. We could have been talking about that, but I think any thought of that has been erased. Not so much in GT4, though, Kyle, where Honor Cavillon continues to impress. Can't say any more about what she's been able to do. Just the class of the field, week in and week out.
Absolutely spectacular racing, not only this week, but also next week. We head back to the U.S. for Laguna Seca. That was our opening round for GT Rivals back in the spring. Round 4 in the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship. That's going to do it for us this afternoon. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our 4th round of the championship. Ryan, thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. 2 weeks from now, I believe that's December 20th. We'll see you at 3 p.m. Eastern on GT World. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. And if you've got any ideas or suggestions for the FCP Euro GT World Challenge America Esports Championship, make sure to leave them in the comments below. Appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.